Welcome to the 11th episode of the Lebanese Physicians Podcast. And today we are joined by Dr. Mohammad Ali Jardali, who is a family medicine resident at the American University of Beirut Medical Center. And the reason I'm inviting Mohammad today is because he has interest in a very important topic that we have not discussed, which is medical school tuition and the loans that medical students in Lebanon are taking to be able to complete their medical school. Mohammad has graduated with a biomedical engineering degree from the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor, and subsequently interned at the Center of Healthcare Engineering and Patient Safety, and then subsequently completed medical school at the Lebanese American University School of Medicine, where I was for a couple of years, which is a good medical school, and now is doing his residency at the American University of Beirut in family medicine. Welcome, Mohammad.
Thank you, Dr. Khalil, for having me.
So yes, before this podcast, I think we went over your research with each other, and it's a very interesting research. So can you tell us more about yourself and what got you interested in this?
Definitely. I think this is a great platform to discuss a topic that is often considered taboo. As doctors, we're often told it's aib to talk about money. So I'm glad we're having this discussion. To me, this is a very personal topic because after I graduated from medical school, I was struggling to pay back my student loans, and I was relying on my parents to help me. It was very awkward. I started talking to other residents and students and figured out I wasn't the only one in this situation. And then I wanted to look up information on student loans in Lebanon, and there was nothing, zero. But if you look in the US, it's such a hot topic, student loans, everyone's talking about it. And then there's this assumption in Lebanon that if you go into medicine, you will be financially set for life. So you can understand why, as a fresh graduate, I felt kind of cheated by the system. I focused all of my energy of getting into medical school and figured things would be smooth and they would work themselves out. But clearly that was not the case. And what clicked in my mind was actually at the hooding ceremony. We were graduating from medical school, and we got an email from the university asking us to make a donation for the Alumni Association. To me, it was preposterous because I still didn't even get my degree, and they were already asking me to make a donation as if I was set for life. Now I'm a big shot doctor and money was raining all over me, which is clearly not the case. And I think no one teaches you about money in medical school. And then from the moment you start residency and the moment you start practicing, you have to think about it. So this is where my research interest was personal. And then I wanted to study it, found no data, and went ahead to study it in the medical schools in Lebanon.
That's very interesting. So, I mean, people may not know, especially listeners in the US, they might think medical school is free in Lebanon, but so how much does it cost to go into medical school in Lebanon on average, I guess?
So medical school in Lebanon is expensive, especially if you want to compare it to the local wages over here. So just to set up the stage for your listeners, in Lebanon, which is a very small country, it's smaller than the size of Connecticut. And we don't know how many people live in Lebanon, which is weird. The last census was done in 1932, before the country of Lebanon even existed. So we think there's between 4 to 6 million in Lebanon. And for those people, we have around 7 medical schools. One of them is public and 6 are private. So the public school doesn't really cost much. It's almost for free. There's a small nominal fee, but the private schools are very expensive, especially compared to the local wages. There's a big range. It goes between $15,000 to $45,000. But again, the minimum wage in Lebanon is $450, and the median is between around $1,600. So medical school in Lebanon is very expensive.
Exactly, and one of the things I think that we need to add into this is the current financial crisis in the country, because when we say the tuition is in dollars, that is based on the, I guess, original rate of 1,500 liras, which obviously with a significant increase in and the lira to dollar ratio at this point, I mean, as of today, I think it's reached up to 14,500 or 15,000. And I bet, I mean, the medical schools cannot keep supporting medical equipment from outside, curricula from outside without increasing their fees. So has there been an increase in the medical school fees recently?
Right. So the phenomena that you're describing in Lebanon is twofold. The first fold is the devaluation of the local currency, which reached at around 1,000%. So this has only happened in 3 other countries in recent history. Lebanon is the 3rd country in which the national currency devalues by 1,000%. So what you were able to buy this time last year, today your income is just completely decimated. So to begin with, before the complete destruction and freefall of the local currency, there was a problem, and there was a dissociation between tuition on one hand and wages on the other hand. This was before the crisis. Now with the crisis, it's weird, I'm talking about tuition in dollars in a country where the currency is in Lebanese lira. And what the 3 medical schools did this year is the dollarization of the tuition. So even though we're in a country where the official currency is Lebanese lira, students are being charged in dollars. And then there's a big debate about what rate do you convert from the Lebanese lira, the national currency, to the US dollars. And this is very controversial. The official peg is only 1,500 Lebanese lira per dollar, but in the free market, or what is called the black market, it's reached, like you said today, $15,000. So there's a mid-range, which is 3,900 liras, and this is what we're calling the dollarization of tuition. So we went from Lebanese lira to US dollars.
So significant increase in tuition, and potentially that does not go with a similar increase in the wages of the parents, especially the parents living in Lebanon. I mean, saying that, I have a couple of questions for you. The first question is, so how many medical schools are in Lebanon?
So like I was saying before, there are a total of 7 medical schools, one of which is public, and the 6 others are private.
Right, and the tuition among the different medical school obviously varies, right?
Right, so for the private schools, we're talking anywhere between $15,000 to $40,000. And then when it's dollarized, so if you want to convert the $40,000 to Lebanese lira, there was a sudden hike in tuition. So overnight, they increased the tuition by 160%. So now it's worth close to 160 million Lebanese lira, which is completely unreachable for the general public.
Right, and I mean, I know students such as Med 1, Med 2, or Med 3 students have already started their medical school. How are they coping with this, and have any students dropped out of medical school due to this tuition increase?
So this is a very important question, and I'm glad that you asked this question. There are no official statistics, but from talking to students, we know there's around 15 students from one university that dollarized the tuition. So Med 1 students who already completed their pre-med studies that left. The other students are stuck in limbo. They're damned if they stay, and they're damned if they leave, because they already took out those student loans and they're halfway in their commitment. And there's a whole judicial process going on right now. So the students took the decision of dollarization to court, and there's legal back and forth between the university and the students right now.
All right. And I mean, I know your study, we went over the presentation that you've done, and your study, which I think is a very, as I told you, I think it's very easily published, I think, once you finish it and write it up. But you decided to look at the household income distribution of the medical students in the different medical schools in Lebanon, and then look at the percentage of these students who took out loans versus the ones who did not. So what did you find? What's the household income distribution of the medical students in Lebanon?
Hi, Yara. Adorable. Again, in my study, I wanted to see what are the barriers of entry into medical school. And something that came up, which was interesting, is the household income distribution of students. So in my study, in which I looked at the 6 private schools, 50% of the responders come from households that make more than $10,000 a month, which makes them part of the top 1% of household income earners in the country. So again, for your listeners to hear, 50% of medical students in Lebanon come from the household incomes that make up the top 1% of earners. And then there was only 2 students in my sample size, which came from household incomes that made below minimum wage. So I always knew that there was a disparity, but it was very...
Yeah, and from talking to each other, you had conducted a study looking at the household income distribution of the medical students in Lebanon, which is interesting as we do not have this information from previous. And also you looked at the percentage of students who got loans in Lebanon, which is a topic that was never discussed in Lebanon, but is frequently discussed in the US. So in terms of the household distribution of the students, what did you find?
Okay, so when we set up the stage for the study that I did, I knew that there was a disparity between the wages and the tuition, and I wanted to see how that was reflected in the student body. So what I found from surveying students from the 6 medical schools in Lebanon was that 50% of the current medical students come from households that make more than $10,000 a month in Lebanon, which puts them at the top 1% bracket. On the other hand of the spectrum, there was only 2 students out of my entire sample size, which is around 400, that came from households that make less than the minimum wage. So there's a huge disparity.
And what did you find in terms of, I mean, yeah, this is a big disparity, and this is basically data that is prior to the financial crisis. So the people who used to make more than $10,000 maybe making much less right now if they have not lost their jobs at this point. So it might be a different sample right now. But the question for you, which is also very interesting, is how many or what's the percentage of students who got student loans, and how much in student loans do they have?
Right. So in the study that I conducted, what I found was that we said 50% come from the top 1% bracket, but 6 out of 10 students take out student loans in Lebanon currently. The mean is around $70,000, and 1/3 of the students take out loans more than $90,000 in a country in which before the crisis we're talking, the median income in Lebanon was $1,200 per month.
Yeah, I mean, these are huge loans. And I guess people do that. They go into medical school, especially given the number of medical schools in Lebanon, thinking that, all right, we'll take the loan, but once we're done with our medical school, we're going to make enough money to pay that loan back. That may be correct if people travel outside the country, right? Like to the Gulf, to the US, to Europe, but that potentially could be harder to establish if people stay in Lebanon. Especially now, it's going to be much harder to make that money to pay it back.
Right now, we're in a near impossible situation. So just to give your listeners an idea about how much residents in Lebanon make. So there's a huge range, but the starting minimum stipend in Lebanon for residents is 800 Lebanese lira per month, and it reaches, in the best institution in the country, it starts at 2 million lira per month. So I don't think your listeners realize how little that is, especially with the devaluation of the currency. So as of today, at the current rate of $15,000, we're talking about 20 cents an hour and 50 cents an hour, and that's the best paid starting residency stipend in Lebanon. We're talking 50 cents an hour.
Wow, yeah, that is very low. And so another question is, do we know, you may have that answer or not, do you know what's the average income of doctors across the spectrum in Lebanon after they finish their residency?
There is no data on that, unfortunately.
Yeah, not much, right? I mean, sometimes the Lebanese Order of Physicians releases some data, but it's not consistent.
So Sharaf Abu Sharaf, who is the current president of the Lebanese Order of Physicians, in an interview a few years ago, he said that 2/3, if I'm not mistaken, but a huge percentage of doctors in Lebanon make less than 2 million lira a month.
Right, I remember that.
So
And
yeah.
yeah, that's quite low. And then once these loans are to be repaid back, how is it right now? I know it's very complicated because do you pay them back in dollars, which are fresh dollars from outside? Do you pay them back in local dollars, which are dollars stuck in the bank, or the Lebanese dollar, or do you pay them in Lebanese liras at the 1,500 or 3,900 rate? Is it set right now, or is it still a work in progress?
So you chose the perfect word, which is it's complicated. Banks are obliged to comply with the official rate, which is still pegged at 1,500. When banks require you to pay back in dollars or in fresh dollars, what you can do is go to the notary and leave the money with the notary, and then take it to court and sue the bank. So this is what collectively a lot of Lebanese are doing with their loans, not just their student loans, but sometimes it has to be decided in court.
Exactly, and it seems like this may be affecting some of the students now, but the newer students who took loans out. The question for you is, one, are the banks giving new loans out to students? I know you were going to ask that question to several of the students now. And number two, the students are already on loans. Are the loans being continued, or has there been any problem with their loans being continued for the medical school?
So there are more than 60 banks in Lebanon. So the banking system in Lebanon is very fragmented. And for each student, they have a unique situation, which depends on the bank which they're dealing with. So there are a lot of variables. No one can give you one straight answer. A lot of the incoming students, especially who started medical school this year, if they didn't have a pre-existing arrangement with the bank before the collapse, they are not able to get a new student loan. And for those students who had an existing loan before the dollarization of tuition, now it's a complete mess and no transparency about how the university is factoring in that tuition. So let's say you took out, you had 30% of your tuition was to be covered by loans, right? So that was when the tuition was worth 60 million Lebanese lira. What happens when overnight the tuition becomes 160 million Lebanese lira? Does the 30% apply to the 60 million or the 160 million? And it's a mess and no one can answer that question, unfortunately. Each student has a unique situation depending on the bank they're dealing with.
Right. So what are, I can see that this puts a lot of stress on the students and their families. And I think even if, the families are stressed out financially, the students will be stressed out too, given what's happening. So what do you think, what are potential solutions to this problem? Is there any advocacy going on by the medical student associations to try to solve this issue?
So I just want to touch on one thing before I answer your question. You brought up the role of family. So just to set this up for your listeners in the US, where the expectation for a medical student in the US is to be financially independent from their parents and to take out loans independently. In Lebanon, when you take out a loan from the bank, you need a cosigner. And in most cases, the parents of the student act as cosigners, and they have to put up collateral to the banks. So in the case you're not able to make your loan payments back, the bank can foreclose on the parent's home, for example. So this is something that is causing families so much anxiety and distress, and it applies to everyone in Lebanon who took out a loan, not just student loans, but parents who took out a student loan signed up for something which they thought was a safe investment in their student education. They thought they had a safe return on investment. And suddenly, that is not the case anymore.
Wow.
Which brings us to the advocacy. So students feel pressured in a corner, and they feel that they have to fight back. So what's happening right now is in a lot of the schools, there was a tuition strike. That was the first step. And the second step, students are not unionizing across the medical schools, but they are talking to each other, and they're getting legal help so that they fight back the schools. So they're pushing back, they're fighting the dollarization, and it's a very stressful environment. I mean, can you imagine being a student? You have to worry about studying for anatomy and pathology and your USMLE, and on top of that, you have to figure out how to pay your tuition. It's a very stressful environment.
Right. And there's no, like, I mean, one is advocacy, right? Like the students pushing for change. And maybe, I don't know if the Lebanese Order of Physicians helps out with any of this or not at this point.
So students are not part of the Lebanese Order of Physicians. The Lebanese Order of Physicians is a union for physicians. And there's a huge barrier of entry even for residents to become members. They have to pay around 6 million liras to become members. And they get paid a starting salary in some residence programs, 800 Lebanese liras. So what the LOP is doing this year is it's arranging a loan for residents to take out to be able to join the union. Yeah,
and because the only reason I'm asking is because the LOP will be impacted by this, right? Because the LOP is made up of physicians who have graduated from medical schools in Lebanon. So for it to be able to keep getting its fees, it may need to help out with this, because if the doctors don't have the money to pay the fees for the LOP, then the LOP loses money that way too. So they should be advocating for this at the same time. Is there any discussion of this at any level in the government in Lebanon?
The Lebanese government is completely incompetent, and they are not addressing the structural and multiple crises that Lebanon is facing, be it financial, be it debt, be it economical. So student loans is not even, they got 99 problems. Lebanese medical student loans ain't one of them.
Yeah, so I think it's in summary, I think, and you can summarize more too, but just to summarize briefly for the listeners, and you can summarize more, it seems like medical school tuition in Lebanon is extremely high for the most part. That's number one. Number two, it seems like a good percentage of the students are getting student loans, which a lot of us did not know about. And number three, it seems like it's going to be hard for the students to pay back their student loans. And I think number four, which we can discuss too, is why are there 7 medical schools in a country of at most 6 million people, right? Including the local residents and the refugees in the country. I think it's probably up to 6 million, although we don't have an official census recently. But that's a huge number of medical schools in a small country like this. So what are your thoughts?
So I'm going to address, I'll start with number 4. Again, like I said, the last census that was done in Lebanon was around 90 years ago, before the country of Lebanon even existed. So no one can tell you with any certainty the number of local residents. It ranges between 4 to 6 million Lebanese people. And then if you want to factor in the refugees, be it Syrian, Palestinian, and Iraqi, it can reach up to 8 million. No one can give you an answer. So to answer your question about why such a small country has so many medical schools, Lebanon actually has 2 of the oldest medical schools in the Near East region, the Eastern Mediterranean region. So 2 of the medical schools were built before the 1900s. So in the end of the 1868 or something like that. Don't quote me on the number, but something along those lines. So that was 2 of the first medical schools in the region. And then we have 3 more medical schools after the year 2000. I think a lot of medical schools in the back of the mind wanted to be built along sectarian lines, which is something you touched on in the introduction episode of your podcast. And then I don't know if your listeners know, but there was talk about, and proposals actually, about an additional 2 medical schools to satisfy the sectarian divide in Lebanon, which I mean, we're talking about a financial barrier of entry into medical school. Can you add on top of it a sectarian barrier of entry into medical school? It's completely outrageous, in my opinion.
Yep. So yeah, thank you for this study, but hopefully you will publish your data soon so it's available for everyone, because I think there needs to be more build-up, I think, on your data to try to figure out the exact extent of this process. Because when you look at your data too, I think not everyone you send the surveys to ended up answering your surveys. So the extent of the problem could be much bigger than this. And I think it's urgent for everyone to know exactly what's going on and to start thinking of solutions to this upcoming problem that I think will get worse with time.
So I think, thank you for encouraging me to publish the study. It's something I'm actively working on right now. And I think having this platform, and thank you for inviting me, it's really important to talk about a problem. So the first step to solve any problem is to admit that there is one. So I'm glad we're sitting here today having this very difficult and emotionally charged conversation and admitting that there is a problem, stating what the facts are so that, like you said, we are able to move forward. There are a lot of solutions actually, and we can talk about them. Some of them can be short-term, some of them medium-term, and some of them, student loans, it's a structural problem. So at the end of it, there needs to be a structural solution to the whole situation in Lebanon. This isn't an isolated incident. This is part of an entire collapsing structure.
Right. I mean, do you want to mention maybe some of these solutions right now before we end the podcast?
So students right now are hurting, and we should do the best that we can to help them. Some of the small things that we can do, I think Dr. Shalouhi discussed in one of your episodes, is just setting up a small fund for the students to register for their USMLE and their Q banks. You want to take it a step further, we can set up a fund to sponsor students to do elective in the US, for example, if they want to pursue residency in the US. And then I think there's an utmost importance to establish an emergency fund to cover tuition for all medical students in Lebanon. A lot of the students in Lebanon have the sponsors for their tuition. And one of the students I was talking to told me that his sponsor, his house got destroyed in the Beirut blast and was not able to keep up with his commitment to pay his part of the assistantship. So Dr. Shatila also mentioned something about reclassifying Lebanon as a low-income country, because right now WHO considers Lebanon as upper middle income, while the reality is completely on the opposite end of the spectrum. This will help Lebanon in terms of accessing a lot of publication services, etc. So that's for the students. They're hurting and we can help them at so many levels. For the residents, there's so much we can do. They're the frontliners in the COVID epidemic. They deserve more than lip service. We can start by hazard pay for residents, loan forgiveness. I mean, we need to talk about loan forgiveness. We can't threaten residents to foreclose on their parents' home if they're not able to pay back their tuitions. Help them with housing, accommodation around the hospitals, financial assistance, medical insurance. A lot of residents in Lebanon do not have medical insurance. It's outrageous. So there's so many things that we can do to help both students and residents survive. And that's even before we talk about structural reform of the entire healthcare system in Lebanon right now. I think it's an inflection point for us to build the healthcare system that we want. Do we want universal healthcare for everyone? Do we believe that education is the right? Is it merit-based? So what kind of system do you want to build? It's really good that we have a platform such as this podcast to discuss ideas and what future we want to build for Lebanon as it rises after this collapse.
Right. I think exactly. I think the most important part right now is to address the short-term problems, because the long-term problems will need a lot of work down the road, and these hopefully will come with what everybody hopes will be some positive changes after this collapse in the country. Hopefully this collapse will bring some major changes and structural reform that will impact all sectors of the Lebanese economy. But the short term, I think that need to be discussed are how can expat doctors or Lebanese expats, I guess, help with some short-term funding for USMLEs, for the students, for their travel outside the country and their electives. And the second one would be like helping with tuition, which is a bigger issue, I think, and that potentially could be done through increasing financial aid in some of these institutions, which I think is already happening in several of the institutions. Financial aid has increased, but I'm not sure about the numbers and if it goes with the increase in tuition that we have seen.
There is an increase in financial aid, definitely, but
Yeah.
I don't think it covers the needs, unfortunately. It comes short.
Yeah. All right, thanks a lot, Mohammed, and maybe you can do some follow-up surveys that we all can benefit from now with the financial situation to see what the situation is at this point in time in Lebanon.
Definitely. And I'm also planning on starting like a financial literacy course for medical students, residents, and attendings, whom I also surveyed in my study. I know financial literacy cannot predict or remedy a crisis, but financial education will play a role, ultimately, a pivotal role in the economic recovery of our country, in which we're all part of. So I'm glad we had this conversation. We cannot be in denial. We need to be proactive, and there are solutions. So let's work on making them happen.
Right. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for your time. A pleasure.
Thanks.